Chatters, chatties, welcome home for a Great American Chat, a podcast where we chat about great American media. I'm Chad Maurice, and today we are chatting about the movie Mr. Manhattan, which premiered August 3rd and kicked off 6 weeks of Great American Pure Flix movies, premiering on Great American Family. But before we get into the movie, we have to chat about this year's Christmas movie schedule. A few new movie titles were released recently. Candace Cameron Bure is going to be in 2 movies this year, one with Eric Johnson and one with Cameron Matheson. A Little Women's Christmas is going to be Great American Family's first ensemble movie. Has a big cast, some of the cast members from County Rescue and Trevor Donovan, Jillian Murray, Jen Lilly, Laura Osnes, and Jesse Hutch are going to be in that movie. So that ought to be a good one. I think that's going to be the big one of the year. Brittany Underwood and Jonathan Stoddard are teaming up again for another royal movie. This one's called A Royal Christmas Ballet. And when I first heard of this movie, I thought it was going to be a sequel to the movie they did last year, A Royal Christmas Holiday. But it's not. She plays a ballerina in this one. And speaking of Jonathan Stoddard, he is going to be in this weekend's movie, Finding Faith, which premieres Saturday at 8 o'clock. On Great American Family. Ash Ty, who was in last year's Journey to Christmas, is going to be in another movie this year. And in this movie, she runs a dog shelter. County Rescue's Kristen Wollett is teaming up with Casey Elliott from the Destined at Christmas movies. And in this movie, they're going to be making wreaths, I guess. It has wreath making in the title. And the PenaVegas are doing another movie together. And in this movie, they're going to be singers and songwriters. So that's pretty exciting. I think we're going to get to hear them sing in this year's Christmas movie. So that'll be really good. And speaking of the PenaVegas, today we are chatting about Mr. Manhattan. It stars Carlos and Alexa. It's directed by Brian Herzlinger. It's written by Andrea Gertson Nasfell. And what's interesting about her is that she also wrote Nothing is Impossible, which premiered this past weekend on Great American Family. So the synopsis of this movie says, when an ambitious attorney struggles to balance his career and the demands of fatherhood after becoming caretaker to his niece and nephew, he's forced to reevaluate his priorities and his lost faith. So here is our cast of characters. We have Mason. He's a hotshot attorney in Manhattan. We have Danny there, Mason's ex-fiancée who ended things with him because she didn't want to move to Manhattan. Ruben is Mason's nephew. AJ is his niece. Tish is his girlfriend who would like to be more. Mr. Stonehouse, there in the bottom right, he's a big important client who Mason is trying to make happy. So the movie starts off with a flashback. Mason stops by his fiance's house to pick her up. Her name is Danny. Mason and Danny arrive at a hospital carrying balloons for his brother and sister-in-law because they just had a baby. And they named the baby Reuben Mason, after Mason. While everyone is fawning over his new nephew, Mason announces that he got into Columbia Law School and is headed to New York City. And Danny is like, what? She's a little surprised. She didn't know about that. Mason's brother asks if he wants to be Reuben's godfather. He says, of course, Danny and I will be there for you and him always. And then we get a 10-year flash forward. Mason is a hotshot lawyer in New York City, going to be made partner. He and his boss are rushing to a high-rise in Manhattan because one of their clients, Mr. Stonehouse, is up in a construction bucket. He is upset about a Wall Street Journal article accusing him of things he didn't do. After talking him down, Mr. Stonehouse says to Mason, "Don't tell Lenora." And they're like, Lenora? Who's Lenora? Because Mason was so good at talking Mr. Stonehouse down, his boss gives him Mr. Stonehouse's account. Mason invites his girlfriend Tish over for dinner to celebrate. She thinks he is going to propose. She slips the ring off of her ring finger on her left hand, waiting for the engagement ring. But surprise, he tells her he got the Stonehouse account and he thinks he will be made partner. That's not what she thought he was going to say. Before they can dig into dinner, he gets a call from Danny telling him his brother and sister-in-law were killed in an accident. Oh boy. Now the big sad start. He heads back home to upstate New York and he meets with his brother's attorney. He tells the attorney he would like to take the kids, but his life has changed, and New York City is no place for kids. Then he thinks about the promise he made to his brother and has a change of heart. For some reason, Reuben, his nephew, doesn't like him, doesn't want anything to do with him. Mason tries to give him a hug, and Mason's like, hey, get out of here, pal, pushes him away. Reuben's younger sister, AJ, she likes Mason, though, so she gives him a big hug. He asks the kids if they want to move to New York City and live with him. AJ is all excited. Reuben is like, no way. He promises he will protect and take care of them. Danny asks if the kids can live with her. He says, I made a promise to my brother to take care of the kids. So he heads back to New York City and tries to resume his normal life, but things are never going to be normal again. He calls Tish, who is a realtor, and asks for help in finding a bigger place to live. She gets all happy because she's thinking that this place is going to be for the two of them. But then she's not happy when she finds out it's for Reuben and AJ. She asks, isn't there anyone else who can take the kids? This is going to change all aspects of your life. He goes back upstate for the funeral and doesn't take Tish with him. He packs up the kids and heads back to Manhattan with them. Danny's dad wonders why Danny didn't go with him. She says, we've been down that road before. New York City isn't for me. Her dad asks, did he say that? Or did you? While driving to New York City, the kids want to know about his car. He says, this isn't my car, it's a rental. People in New York City don't have cars. Then they want to know about his house. He says, I don't have a house. People in New York City don't have houses. We live in apartments. This was a humorous scene. I really like this scene. And these two kids throughout this movie are really cute. I thought these two actors did a really good job. Time for him to go to work. He has no babysitter, so he takes the kids to his office. Man, nothing can go wrong there, right? And the office receptionist gets the kids ice cream and then leaves them in his office alone. They hide under his desk, and Tish comes in and sits down. Reuben takes a gummy bear out of his ice cream and sits it on the top of her foot, and she winds up kicking him in the face when she reacts. Then the paramedics show up. I think he needed the county rescue team. That's what he needed there. Mason sneaks them and a pizza into his apartment building in hopes that his landlady won't see them, but of course she does, and this lady is a piece of work, let me tell you. She asks them where their parents are. AJ says, in heaven. Mason says to her, thanks a lot, says to his landlady. Mason tucks them in bed, and AJ says a prayer, which is a touching moment. She asks God to say hi to her parents. She asks Mason for a hug, so he gives AJ a hug. And then he tries to give Reuben a hug, but again, he isn't having it. Pushes him away, says, no way, buddy. Mason calls Danny because AJ left one of her teddy bears at home, and Danny says, oh, I can bring it to you. Okay, so now all the fun begins here. Mason tries to interview nannies. in the park, which makes for a funny scene. While doing an interview, AJ falls off the swing and skins her knee. A Karen in the park calls the police because no one is attending to her. The cop wants to know how Ruben got a bruise on his eye and wants to know if Mason has been meeting women in the park all day. Mason says, "Hey, wait a minute, you got the wrong idea. I'm just interviewing nannies." The cop isn't buying it. He says, "I'm going to be checking in on you." I like this cop. I like the actor that played this cop. We see him again a little bit later in the movie. But he was pretty amusing in this movie. Mason gets home from work the next day, finds his landlady putting an eviction notice on his door. She says the maximum occupancy in this apartment is 2, not 3, and you gotta go. He says, "Wait a minute, we need more time." And she just gives him an evil eye. Mason goes into his apartment and sees Danny there. The kids spill the beans to Danny about everything that has happened, about Ruben getting kicked in the face, and AJ skinning her knee, and the paramedics and the police showing up. Danny looks at Mason and thinks, "What is going on?" He says, "Hey, it's not as bad as it sounds." The four of them share some Chinese takeout, and the kids and Mason convince Danny to stay. In the middle of the night, AJ wakes up with a nightmare, so Danny sings to her the way her mother used to. Ruben hears the song and gets emotional. Yeah, that was a little tear-jerker scene there. This movie had a lot of tear-jerking scenes. And this one right here coming up was probably the biggest tear-jerker scene. They go through some stuff Danny brought from their house. And one of the things is Ruben's father's baseball cap. Ruben says, "I don't want that," and runs out onto the balcony. Then we get this emotional scene here between he and Mason. Ruben tells Mason, "You're never going to be my father. You're nothing like him." Man, this kid just isn't very nice to Mason. Mason makes him put on his dad's baseball cap and says, "Let's play a game. You be your dad, and I'll be you." Mason, pretending to be Ruben, says, "I hate it here, and Uncle Mason has no idea what he's doing." Ruben, pretending to be his dad, says, "Sometimes life gets hard, but you have to push through it." Mason puts on the ball cap and says, Uncle Mason is just trying to do his best. He's not going to leave you." Then he says, "I love you, Champ," because Champ is what Ruben's father used to call him. Ruben breaks down and hugs Mason, finally. So yeah, this was probably the most emotional scene in the movie, at least for me it was. And if you weren't crying after the end of this scene, you were either dehydrated or you have a heart of stone. Let me tell you. This was probably, one of the best scenes in the movie, I thought. Tish shows up to show them new apartments. She gets jealous that Danny is there, as she should. She shows them an apartment that costs $18,000 a month. They all look at each other and think, yeah, no way, man. After an unsuccessful day at apartment hunting, they take the kids to Central Park. They have a fun day eating ice cream. Mason talks to Danny about the past. He says, "I'm sorry for what happened between us." She says, "We were just kids." "Yeah, but you're not kids anymore, Danny." Ruben gets upset when they get back to the apartment and says he feels guilty for having a good time or for having fun. He forgot he's supposed to be sad, is what he says. Mason says, "You don't need to feel bad. Your parents would want you to be happy." So they take the kids to church. After church, they run into Mason's client, Mr. Stonehouse. Danny asks him if this is his church, and he says, "I own a few properties nearby, and I stop in on occasion." Mason wants to know what he is doing in church, and he says, "We all need a little help now and then." Huh. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Yeah. He tells Mason he likes seeing him in church. It shows him that Mason is a good guy who can be trusted. After church, they go to a diner for lunch. AJ asks Danny When you and Uncle Mason were in love, did you have an engagement ring? And did you give it back? Danny says, yeah, I did. AJ asks Mason if he sold it. He tells Danny he didn't. He gave it to his brother to hold on to. Danny gets a surprised look on her face. The waitress comes by to take their order. And she calls Danny and Mason Mom and Dad. They kind of look at each other and smile. Then Mason and Danny touch hands when reaching for silverware. I'm telling you, a lot of emotions going on in this scene. Oh, baby, there were some looks. There sure were between Mason and Danny. Tish sets up a meeting with the head of some private school for the kids. Danny says, that school is really expensive. How can Mason afford it? Tish says, well, after we get married, we will have 2 incomes. And Danny's like, oh, I didn't realize things were that serious between the two of you. Danny gets a little uncomfortable after that conversation with Tish and tells Mason that she needs to head home. He opens up to her and says, I think we made a mistake breaking up years ago. I don't want you to leave. I think you belong here in New York City with me and the kids. She shuts him down and says, no, I'm out of here. And I think she does this because she doesn't want to interfere with his relationship with Tish. I think is why she shut him down and ran out of there. But she should interfere with his relationship with Tish because Tish is not the right girl for him. So Danny heads back upstate and finds Mason's engagement ring in his brother's dresser drawer. She starts crying to her dad because she realizes that she screwed up the past. What she should have done was she should have called Mason and told him that she screwed up the past. But she probably didn't because she probably feels that it's too late because he's with Tish now. Probably what was going on there. Mason gets a call that Mr. Stonehouse is in the hospital. He can't afford a babysitter to watch the kids, so they talk him into leaving them home alone, just like Macaulay Culkin. Once again, nothing can go wrong, right? They do a video call with Danny. The landlady knocks on the door. Danny tells them who do not go to the door, but they don't listen to her. The landlady can hear them talking, and she wants to know where their uncle is. She winds up calling the police. Mason runs home from work. He tries to explain what is happening with the same police officer that talked to him in the park. The officer is very understanding, but tells him that maybe he should reconsider his decision about being the kid's guardian. Ooh, so this gets Mason thinking. So Mason decides to give custody of the kids to Danny. Danny doesn't like the idea. She's changed her mind on that since the beginning of the movie. And she tells Mason that he is more than capable of raising the kids. The kids also don't like the idea. The kids wind up staying with Danny, and Mason goes back to New York City, and everyone is depressed. AJ asks Danny why Mason didn't want them. She explains that sometimes when you love someone, you have to let them go so they can be happy. AJ says, that's what you did. You loved Uncle Mason, but you let him go so he could live his fancy life in New York City. Was everyone happy? Danny says, you are right, but Uncle Mason is happy. AJ says, he is when you are there. Yeah, AJ's a smart kid, let me tell you. She knows what's going on. Mason finds out Mr. Stonehouse is alone in the hospital with no family, so he goes to visit him. Mason asks him who Lenora is, because at the beginning of the movie, when Mr. Stonehouse got down off that lift, he said, don't tell Lenora. Mr. Stonehouse explains in business, he always preaches to never let a big deal get away, but in his personal life, he let something get away. He says he would give up all of his success in business if he could have her in his life. Mason tells him, unfortunately, I did the same thing. He explains that he gave custody of the kids to Danny. He says it was too challenging, trying to find a new place to live, trying to find a school district, trying to find a nanny. Mr. Stonehouse says, I can help you with the housing. I own several apartments. How would you like a brownstone in the village? I thought this was funny. Mr. Stonehouse offers him a stone house. Mason has dinner with his girlfriend Tish and tells her he regrets giving the kids to Danny. He says he gave up too soon. Tish sees the writing on the wall and tells him, you need someone like Danny in your life, not me. She kisses him on the cheek and walks out of his life. And she was a good sport about it. She didn't get upset or anything. She realized that he and Danny belonged together. So Mason runs upstate with balloons and pours his heart out to Danny again. He tells her he does want a New York City life, but he wants a New York City life with her and the kids. He says, I never stopped loving you. She plants a kiss on him, and then we get a flash forward. We see them living in, we get another flash forward. Yeah, we see them living in the stone house that Mr. Stonehouse set up for them. And we see Mason and Danny are married, and the kids are happy. And the credits roll with Mason taking the kids to Ruben's Little League baseball game. And I'm telling you that I love this movie. Yeah, this is the kind of movie that I want to see on Great American Family. And I wish every movie were like this one. This was so good. It has it all. It has heart, humor, emotion, has a great cast from the main characters to the supporting characters. The landlady I thought was a really good villain. Like I said before, I liked the cop, the actor who played the cop. I thought he was amusing. And Mr. Stonehouse, I thought the guy who played him, I thought did a really good job. I thought his acting was very natural. And Alexa, let me tell you, she looks amazing in this movie. I thought throughout this entire movie that she looked like Jennifer Grey's character, Baby, from Dirty Dancing. And actually, I have a picture here. Let me show this picture here. Hold on, let me get it up here. Look at this. Does she look like Baby or what? Man, I think she does, at least in this movie. And it's not just the curly hair. I think they have similar facial features. So yeah, throughout this whole movie, I kept thinking about that Dirty Dancing movie every time I saw her on screen. So Alexa and Carlos have good chemistry, as well they should, since they're married. Favorite scenes in this movie, I think that that scene on the balcony when they're doing the role playing, when Mason and Ruben are pretending to be each other and they're trading that baseball cap back and forth. I thought that movie is really emotional. That really got to me. And I also thought the ending scene was really good when Mason shows up with the balloons and confesses his love again to Danny and how the kids should be with him in New York City, her and the kids. Yeah, so really enjoyed the ending. So definitely a thumbs up for me on this movie. And I hope the Christmas movies this year are of this quality. Man, that'd be fantastic if they were all this good. We'd have a great American Christmas, let me tell you. Now, if you didn't catch this movie the first time it airs again tonight, Wednesday, August 21st at 8 o'clock Eastern on Great American Family. So definitely check this out. I think you will enjoy it. Now, this weekend, we have a movie called Finding Faith airing. It stars Jonathan Stoddard and Ashley Bratcher, and that airs on Great American Family Saturday at 8 o'clock Eastern. And in the next episode, I'm either going to recap that Finding Faith movie, or I might do that basketball movie that was on this past weekend, Nothing is Impossible. That was a good one too. So I don't know. It depends on how much time I have. I'd like to do a recap on both of them, but we'll see what happens. So, thanks for being here. And as always, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast on the podcast apps and on socials. I am at Great American Chat on Instascam, Facebook, and YouTube, and at GA Chat Podcast on X. Until next time, you keep the faith. Keep smiling. Keep your friends close.